Hey guys, welcome to our very first course we have here on the N3K channel. It is going to be a course about Unity, so everything you need to know about the engine is going to be covered. We're also going to do an introduction to coding, so if you don't know how to code just yet, this is a very good place to start. So at the very beginning, we're going to create a project, explore all the windows you have in Unity, and then move on to coding a little bit. We're also going to have a good look at the Unity engine namespace, which means that we're going to be looking at function that Unity gives us, and we're going to be able to just make our lives so much easier with those. And also, if you're new to coding, I still suggest that you stick around because, well, you're going to be learning the Unity engine, but also, that is how I learned, just by looking at somebody else doing it, copying it on my side, and just eventually just picking up the patterns. That is how I learned, and I just recommend that if you're new, at least try that, because that might quite help. Who knows? On top of that, so on top of learning the Unity engine and also learning some function in the namespace, we're going to be building a game. So if you never really built a game, this is also going to be a very good experience for you. The game we're going to be building is a simple snake game. The reason I've chose a snake game is because I'm able to cover a lot of coding techniques in that simple game. So we're going to be talking about multidimensional arrays, we're going to be talking about getting inputs from a keyboard, talking about moving objects, all very simple topics, but this is pretty much something that is at the base of a lot of games. So we're going to be covering those topics. And without further ado, let's actually just jump right into it. So when you're going to be opening up Unity for the very first time, this is the kind of window you're going to be having. So basically it asks you to create a project, which is what we're going to be doing right now. So the project name, I'll name mine Snake Tutorial or Unity Course. You can name this pretty much anything you want. Now you're also going to have a location down here. This is where your folder, your asset folder, your project folder is going to be put. So mine has its own location here. I'm fine with that. I'm also going to be putting this on 3D by default. To put yours in 2D, the only real difference is that when you boot the engine, a lot of settings are going to be set for you to work in 2D. Now those are really easy to just reverse once you're inside. And I'm used to actually working in 3D since Unity is actually it's a 3D engine. That's why it's called Unity 3D. I'm just more used to using it in 3D, even though we're going to be making a 2D game here. So, going to be leaving that on 3D, create my project, and we're going to be looking at the interface you're going to get. Now, this is not exactly how yours should look at the moment, and I will introduce you to the very first thing we're going to be looking at. At the very top right here, there is a little layout button here, a little layout drop-down menu. Now, this is really depending on which one you like the most in the end. If you want to follow this tutorial at its full potential, and you know, just have the windows where I put my windows, make sure you put yours on tall. This is what it's going to end up looking like, and then we're going to be moving some windows around so we can have the same exact layout as I have. Now if you already worked with Unity before, you pretty much already have your layout, so I just suggest you stick with that. Just stick with something that you're really comfortable using. So mine is something like this. I'm going to be playing with the windows a little bit. My inspector at the very right, just going to make sure that it's all the way here. Now the hierarchy and the project window, same thing, just gonna push them on the right hand side. The next thing I tend to do is I take my project folder over here, I right click on it, and I put that in a one column layout. That is how Unity actually used to display things before. Then they came out with the two column layout, which I don't really like. It just gives you a nice little search here where you can just search for models, prefab, or scripts. We'll see more about this a little bit later on, but right now I'll just make sure to leave it on one column layout. Now when I actually do my layout, I just use one more window on top of that, so I'm just going to select it really quickly. We're going to go at the very top here, find our console window right here, and I'm going to be grabbing this by the little tab you see here. You're going to be grabbing this like this, click and hold, and then you get to dock it pretty much anywhere you want. So this is just like a normal dockable window. I like to dock mine at the very bottom here. The reason I like this layout so much is just because I have a lot of space to work in 3D here. Let's actually talk about this first window here, the scene window. As you can tell, this one is split in two. There is the game window and also the scene. Now, the scene window is when you do your editing. That's when you're placing objects in the scene. That's when you're just rotating stuff around, and we're going to be talking about that in a second. The game window is what happens when you're playing. So at this point, notice that I can't really move around the same exact way as I did in the scene window. That is because when I'm in my game view, I'm using the game camera, and what I actually see in the game depends on what I told my camera to see it. So right now, I'm just going to drop an object really quickly, a cube, and as you can tell, my camera is pointing towards that cube. If we go see in the game window, that is what we see. So that's really the big difference. You're not able to move in the game window unless you have some game logic going on, which we're gonna have again a little bit later on. Right, so let's talk about actually navigating through this 3D environment. Now, if you're familiar with the Doom control, a really old game, you can actually use those control. Let me just explain really quickly. I have my mouse right here and I hold my right click. When I hold my right click, I'm able to just rotate around, so have a look around myself. Now using my other hand, I'll go on the WASD key and I'll be able to move just like in a flying FPS, I guess. I'm not sure if that does exist, but we're able to move and fly like this. You're also able to move around using your middle mouse, so if you just click and hold on your middle mouse, as you can see I'm just dragging this around. Now you also have a zoom out and a zoom in with your mouse again. So you can just practice navigating around here a little bit. You're going to be using this window quite a lot. And it's quite fun when you're building your level when you have some real assets going on. So maybe like little trees, little hill, boxes. You can just place them around super fast if you're used to those controls. Right, so let's talk about some more controls that you have in this window. Now something I'm going to ask you to do really quickly is go at the very top here, click on Game Object and then create a new cube. Just like I did a second ago. So basically, I've got a cube right now, and if you didn't see what I did right now is I just moved this to 0, 0, 0 in position. This is something I see in my inspector, and I will come back to that in a moment as well. So if I just click on this, now when selecting an object, you have a lot of keybinds that transfers from the Windows Explorer to this. So if we just try and copy by doing a Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V, I don't know if you could tell right here, but we've got another cube, and if I just move this around like this, as you can tell, there is now two. If we do Ctrl-Z, it moves back to the position. If we do it again, it removes the cube. Let's actually talk about moving this around. So as you can tell right now, I have a gizmo that allows me to move this on the Z-axis, on the X-axis, and also on the Y-axis. Now quickly notice that the Y-axis is actually up and down, it's not the Z-axis. So in Unity, it's actually inverted with a lot of softwares where the Z-axis would define the height of the object. Now the reason I have this gizmo is because I have an object selected and I've pressed on W, which is, if you just have a look at the very top left side here, you have some option on your object, and as you can tell, this is what you have by default. It's just a little hand where you can just move around your scene. When I press W, I go in the move gizmo, so now I'm able to move the object. The next one is rotation, that you can also reach by pressing on E on the keyboard. And then you can rotate around the X-axis, Y-axis, and Z-axis. You can tell which axis it is by the color, so the red circle would mean X, the Z is blue, and the Y is green. And after the scale, there is one more that I don't really use because I don't really like to use Unity in 2D, is if we go in 2D mode by just pressing that button here, or on the keyboard it's the number 2, then if we go with the last setting here, which you can get by pressing on T or just pressing up here, you can modify the cube like this, as simple as it looks. So it allows you to actually modify things in 2D. If we go back in the 3D scene and we press on T, we'll still have the same exact option, but it's only going to allow you to scale this on the X and Y axis, not the Z axis, because it's meant for 2D games and there really shouldn't be a third axis in 2D. So here it is. That is basic navigation. And just one more thing that I'd like to show you is when we take our cube, let's say we duplicate it and we just move it on this side, there is actually a way to snap. As you can see, it's snapping every single meter. And the way I do this is by moving it by holding Control. So this is a normal just move, and when I hold Control, it actually snaps 1 meter from where it was. So you can actually mess this up. Be just really careful about that. if you just move your object like this and it's not really sticking to the other one, and you're holding control, you're still going to be a little bit offset, as you can tell. So whenever you actually use this, make sure you know where you're starting from, right? And if in case you just want to make sure that those object touches like this, but maybe they're not the right length for them to actually just snap correctly. Right now they are. You can just duplicate this, move this, and as you can tell, they snap perfectly. But let's just say that the scale would be something like 1.3, and then you'd actually try to move that. As you can tell, they overlap a little bit. Now there is a way to snap on vertex, and let me just quickly show you how to do that. When you hold V on the keyboard with your move tool, you actually snap on the vertex, and you can click, say, on this one, and you'd like this vertex to be attached to this one. This way they're now just stuck together. So that's a pretty good way to make a level without actually having those little small gaps that might actually mess up your game in the end, depending on which technique you use to say move your character or check if there is a ground. Now notice that every time I duplicate a cube or every time I select something, we have just some action happening here in the hierarchy. Now the hierarchy is just a text representation of your scene. Everything you're going to be seeing in this 3D environment is going to have a definition right here on the hierarchy. Right now my scene is called Untitled, so we don't really have a scene name. This is not saved, and it still displays what there is inside of it. So let's just say that I'm going to be a little bit crazy and create a directional light. Another one. As you can tell, there is now two. There is this guy here and also this guy here, and we can just select them using the hierarchy. So just say that I'm looking for the second directional light. I can simply double click on this one and it's gonna actually zoom on the object. Or so that you're looking for your camera, you don't know where your camera is in the scene, you've been looking around for like a good minute, you can also find it using the hierarchy. So as you can tell, I have my main camera selected. Now I can double click on it and it shows it in the view, or I can click on F and it's gonna do the same exact thing. So it just goes back to my object like this. Right, so that's another way to actually control the object you have in your scene. If you delete them from here, say I choose those two cubes, I delete, they're also gone from the scene, so just be wary about that. Those two are connected together, that is what you have to tell yourself. Right, so there is also one more thing connected to these guys, and as you can tell a bit earlier, we played with it. It is the inspector on the right hand side. Now the inspector is connected to a lot of stuff in Unity. Everything you select is most likely going to have a definition in the inspector. So if we just have a look here, I'm going to select my camera, and then we have some information about that camera. So if we just check out this component right here, it clears on the skybox. It has a different field of view, which we can modify. It has a GUI layer, audio listener, all that kind of good stuff, and also a transform, which will contain the position. We can modify it at the very top right here, and it's going to be reflected inside of the game. We can also play with the rotation a little bit. As you can tell, it also reflects it in the game. And they're just connected together. But now, these things we see on the right hand side, they're only for our selected object, which is in this case the camera. If we were to select the cube, they actually change. As you can tell, they're different stuff that the camera doesn't really have. So the camera doesn't really have a box collider. The camera doesn't really have a mesh renderer, but the cube does. So as you can tell, the inspector changes its definition, what it puts inside of the inspector. It changes with what you have selected. And now it's also going to be changing for some other stuff as well, not only things in the scene. If I just give you a small example really quickly, I go inside of the input manager. Now the input manager is not something in the scene, but as you can tell, it's been drawn in the inspector. So this doesn't really have to do with anything right now in my scene or hierarchy, and it's still here. So just be worried about that. When you click on something, when you select something and you're not sure where you should be looking at to get information about that, say something, then make sure you check out the inspector, because what you're looking for is most likely there. Alright, so if we just proceed, the console down here is what is going to be reporting some errors. So if your game crashes in the middle of nowhere, it's going to tell you why. So it's going to crash, and it's also going to tell you why, which line of code didn't work, and also maybe some warning that goes with that, a stack trace, so you can go back in your code and actually look, okay, so it did that function well, it did that other function right after, and then it crashed. So it's really going to be useful for debugging. It's really going to be useful for just communicating with you when the game is playing. This is something we're going to be using quite a lot when we code, and you're just going to have a good time with it, I guess. And finally, the last window we're going to be using is the project window. Now this one, I will leave it right here for now. We're not going to be doing anything, we're not going to be talking about this one just for now, because I'll be reserving it for the next episode. It's quite a big window, we're going to be doing a lot of stuff with that, and there is a logic to be made behind this window, so we're just going to leave it here for now. And let's quickly just wrap this tutorial up with an exploration up here of the file menu. So at the very top here, we have scenes. You can actually create a new scene, save a new scene. Now something that is really important to know is when we're going to be coding, you don't really need to save scenes, because scenes are not going to contain information about the code you write. They're not going to be containing information about the assets you create. Those are going to be objects on their own. So in the Windows Explorer, you're going to be able to find those objects. They're not going to be really part of the scene. The only moment where you need to change the scene is when you move something around or when you change some settings in the inspector. So right now I just created a new cube, another one. I can save my scene. The way I do this is by hitting Ctrl S, and it's going to prompt me right now. The only reason it's prompting me is because I never really just created a scene in the first place. Let me create my very first scene. I'm going to call it game, and when I save now, it's going to be overwriting game. So let's create a new cube, and as you can tell, this scene is not really saved, it's not really up to date, because the name up here says game and then a little star. The little star means that it has not been saved. If I press Ctrl S, the star goes away. Now if I move something around, it goes back to being in a dirty state where you have to save it again. Right, so that's pretty much all you have to do when you save a scene. Really simple. We're going to be talking a little bit more about scenes later on, and also build settings. This is something I'm going to skip for now. Now in the edit section, there ain't much to talk about except the preferences. I invite you to just open the preferences and have a look at the external tool. For this tutorial, for this course, I'm going to be using Visual Studio to code, but you can also be using MonoDevelop. I really do recommend that you use Visual Studio though, because MonoDevelop is just starting to fail a little bit, and I think they're going to drop it eventually. Just some rumor I heard, but still, we're going to be using Visual Studio on my side, so if you just want to see like matching colors and how things work in Visual Studio, just make sure it is on Visual Studio. You can also play with the colors a little bit, colors of your UI, change the color of axis, change the color of pretty much anything, and you have your keybinds you can modify, and that is pretty much it. The rest we don't really care about right now. Now the third option is asset. We get to create some kind of asset, so this is a lot of stuff you're going to be seeing on the art side most likely. We're also going to be creating asset as programmers, because the scripts we're going to be making are going to be considered as assets. But we're talking here about materials, we're talking about models, texture, font, but all that kind of good stuff is actually considered as assets. So if you want to import those, if somebody else made it for you, you can actually import their package via this. So pretty much your whole game is going to be made out of asset. Now, since I've installed Unity with the standard asset pack, which is something they just give you by default if you just check the little button, you can actually import some package just to test it out. As you can tell right here, I have few. I have the vehicle prototyping environment. Let's actually import some environment just to check it out, see what they give us and how it works. I'm going to uncheck this, just bring some, let's say we're going to be bringing some water. Why not? We can actually just bring some water. So I'm only going to check water, import, and they're going to be putting it in my project window, which I said we're going to be coming back to that in a moment. But as you can tell, without even doing anything in my game, I'm able to just use the asset that they've made. And here we go, we have a lake, we have some kind of ocean actually. And this is all made for us. This is Unity making a package, and we simply import it. So a nice little flow of water going on here. Now I'm going to remove this because we're not going to be using water in our game, unfortunately. It does look very good though. Now the next menu is game object, and this one I use quite a lot. So this is where you create some prototyping objects. Since we don't really have models for everything, we're like programmer and we're not really good with art. Well, I mean, we're not the best with art at least. Then you get to create some nice basic cube like that. You get to create some nice plane, some quad, all that kind of good stuff can be created towards here. You can also create some lights, some audio source, UI, when you're actually ready to create some UI, and also like camera, particle system. There is a lot of stuff you can do here. You just create like a really base object used for prototyping. There is also other object that you're not going to be using for prototype, such as the lights. Those one can be actually final. The particle system, if you just tweak it a little bit, it can look quite good. And that is pretty much it. Now the component, I am not going to get into this because this is a lot of stuff we're going to be doing with code as soon as we understand how to put it. And finally, the window is just to pop your windows back. So if you just say you delete your hierarchy right here, it's a floating window now, and you just click on X, you lose it. You can find it back in the window. So as you can tell right here, hierarchy Control 4. You pop it back up, and here you go. You can actually just put it back where it was, like this. So this is where I'm actually going to end the episode today. We had a rough look at how the engine actually just looks, where we can click, how the windows work a little bit. It is not supposed to be like something you understand right away. You're going to be understanding just by practicing, just by using it a lot. So guys, thanks a lot for watching. I invite you to watch the next episode, which is going to be about the assets, and we're going to be importing some cool stuff. We're going to be looking at texture, we're going to be looking at models, scripts, material, a lot of stuff. So guys, just make sure you tune in. Also check out the channel, subscribe to the channel, check out the Patreon page if you wish to just support me, and just support me making some more course, because I'm actually having quite a lot of fun. That's what I'm saying. It's only my first course, but still, I'm having quite a lot of fun. So just check out the Patreon page if you wish to quit. So check out the Patreon page if you wish to support me. Other than that, please quit. If you're unable to support via Patreon, then just leave a like on this video. It helps quite a lot. You can also leave a comment, which is also going to help quite a lot. And I'll just make sure to just read all of them and try to reply to your question, guys. I have a lot of questions coming in, but I do read every single one of your comment. And I'll do my best to actually read them all for this video specifically, because it's the start of the course. So guys, thanks for watching again, and I will see you next time.